Lehrhaus Judaica, in partnership with the Osher Marin JCC, presented a half-day conference in March 2013 entitled Free-Ranging Communities, Jewish Life in Marin and Hollywood. This segment features a conversation moderated by San Francisco State University professor Marc Dollinger with two people who have played key roles in the development of Marin's organized Jewish community, Rabbi Michael Barenbaum and Elliot Levin.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to begin with a rhetorical question, which I'm going to offer to begin the introduction, and just ask the two of you to contemplate as you think about all of the questions and answers. I learned something working on the introductions for today, and that is not only are these two men from Chicago, they're actually from the same neighborhood in Chicago. They're actually from the same shtetl.
And we ate delicatessen from the same kosher butcher.
We did actually.
Listening to the incredible stories in the previous group, I was struck by the fact that we're here trying to define Marin County Jewish cultures, only to realize in many ways Marin County Jewish cultures are actually the cultures of the Jewish world that are all conglomerated here, and I'm sort of wondering generally how we can even call anything Marin when everything Marin seems to be something else. Elliot Levin, raised in Chicago, began his career in the JCC movement, first in Chicago as a youth leader, and then moved to Los Angeles in the mid-1970s, where he ran Camp JCA. That's important not only because Jewish summer camps has been a theme developing today, but it's also, you may be interested to know that Elliot was a camp director when Ruben Arquilovich was a camper at Camp JCA. He is now the executive director of Camp Newman, which succeeded Camp Swig. And I'll just let you know, if it weren't for Brian Colbert in my 5th grade class, I would have been your camper too. Elliot came to Marin in 1980, where he directed the Marin JCC, at that time a 3,000 square foot multi-purpose building with a trailer and an outdoor pool. In 1986, he became the head of the United Jewish Community Centers, which was the umbrella group for the Bay Area. The last 22 years, he's founded and now runs Partnership Resource Group, which is a consulting group across the entire Western states. He has older sons who were born and raised in Marin's, graduates of Brandeis Hillel Day School. He and his wife Beverly are now raising Sam, 11 years old. They're members of Congregation Rodef Shalom and Kol Shofar. And I do have to say, he is still waiting for the Cubs to win the series. Rabbi Michael Barenbaum, I affectionately call him the Dean. And he is the Dean because he is the anchor, the creator, the builder and the sustainer of so much that we have here in Marin County. He now holds the honor of Rabbi Emeritus at Congregation Rodef Shalom, where he led from 1977 to 2003, 27 years, a time period that went from 300 families to 1,100 families. We enjoy all too infrequent lunches where I've learned about his earlier rabbinate, stints in London, his passionate and articulate voice for social justice. He is a founder of the Marin campus of Brandeis Hillel Day School. He's a founder of Parno House. He has either created, advised, or led just about every organization we can imagine in this county. He was husband of 42 years to Hannah of blessed memory, whom we all miss and continue to miss in our community. And with that, I would like to open with a question. After all your years of experience and even what you heard from today, what hasn't changed in Marin County since the day you got here in terms of Jewish life? Elliot, you want to start us off?
Well, I think one thing hasn't changed is competing with a day like this in early March and getting people into the auditorium. It's been one of the major ones. And I think what also hasn't changed is a theme that I certainly heard echoed from our speakers and from some of the chatter, is that we all, or many of us, came from somewhere and brought that somewhere here.
Michael?
Well, got it. Mount Tamalpais has not changed. And frankly, the ability of the Jewish community here to want more, to always want something else, and to want to expand the Jewish life in Marin County, that hasn't changed. As much as we have, there's always room for more, and there are always people who are willing to ask for it and people who are willing to work for it in order for it to happen for other people.
So we have a reputation. We have many reputations. One of them is that we are a dynamic center, that there is a lot that changes here by virtue of the fact of the incredible different cultural energies that enter. So if you could take a snapshot of today compared to that snapshot on the first day you arrived in the county, what has changed more than anything else?
I'll go first.
With that look, I will. Having been, certainly we were thinking of what a campus might look like here, turned into somewhat of a numbers geek. We were looking at numbers of Jews. Jews love to count Jews, right?
Even though we're not supposed to.
I remember my dad, we used to travel take summer vacations and go up to New England or Colorado and go to these small towns. My dad would open the phone book in the motel to count the Cohens, Anyway, what struck me was in 1959 there were 3,000 Jews in Marin. And more recently, the 2011 statistics show 28,000 Jews. That's about the size of the metropolitan Denver Jewish community. So I think one thing that we've seen is simply large, almost explosive demographic growth that's happened over that period of time. But continuing on the numbers geek theme, 13% of those people are from the Bay Area. It's the lowest percentage of indigenous Jews of anywhere in the Bay Area, which tend to underscore that people are bringing other Jewish stuff.
You're trying to say
with
there are more
them.
Miwok Indians living than Jews?
more Miwoks than that. Sonoma and Marin County combined is like 50,000 Jews. It's a much more significant critical mass now, certainly than when I first got here.
It's interesting, Elliot. The Jewish Federation had been working with the demographer over the years, and they sort of told the demographer what they wanted him to find in his study of the Bay Area Jewish community. So I have a feeling there were a lot more Jews living here than 3,000 to begin with. The young man who spoke, I don't remember his name, who moved to West Marin when he came here, that was a way that you could tell what someone wanted Jewishly from being here. The people who moved to West Marin didn't want very much of a Jewish connection and didn't want to be counted in the Jewish world. The people who lived in the population centers, San Rafael, Terra Linda, Tiburon Mill Valley, Kentfield, they wanted to be counted. They wanted a Jewish life. And I don't trust numbers that well. You work with numbers, right?
Turns out the last Federation service area demographic tally showed that San Francisco Bay Area, and if we sort of made an estimate on the East Bay at the time, comprised the third largest Jewish community in the country after New York and Los Angeles.
Wow.
And which is a great shocker, to tell your friends. And of course, the challenge is, where are they? And I think if the question is where are they in the San Francisco Bay Area at large, I think Marin County, and certainly we can add Sonoma County to that, probably have that challenge more than others. So I want to sort of wrap that into a trend, at least that I heard from the 7 presentations. And that was sort of where does one get their Jewishness? How does the Jewishness get expressed? And how does it get expressed here? There seemed to be 2 major responses. One was summer camp. In this case, it looks like Camp Swig because it's the local camp, and synagogues, which is nationally the place where sort of most kids growing up get their identity and form it. And then at that moment, I sort of realized we have a former residential summer camp director, and we have a rabbi from the synagogue setting. And I wonder if you could sort of talk about either your settings or both settings, or how it is that these sorts of places for our youth, as well as for their parents and grandparents to be, in terms of translating what it means to be Jewish.
First of all, like I said, I met my wife at a residential summer camp in 1968. That's 45 years ago. And I think that the camp experience has fostered Jewish life among the young people in Marin County. But I think the synagogue has created something. The camp creates a sort of visceral connection to Jewish values and Jewish practices and Jewish fun, if you will. The synagogue and the JCC, by extension, created, and I'm talking about all the synagogue, creates community. And without community, the camps and nothing else is possible. All of the creations, the center, Parno Friendship House, everything that we have here is because there was a community that was strong enough to support it. And I just also have to say that Camp Tawanga, not affiliated with a denominational movement, has had an enormous impact on Jewish youth, and still does.
In even a broader context than synagogues and camps, the Marin experience, and perhaps that of the Western states' Jewish communities, all of which are by definition newer, have typically relied much, the Jewish communities have relied more on their institutions to do Jewish than those communities east. In East, you could step outside in some communities and be Jewish. So the institutional fabric here became far more important, not just camps and synagogues, but JCCs and even to some degree the other network of communal agencies. I remember the first year I got here, and Michael said to me, so I was here months, the kid from Chicago via LA, and he says, well, you know, we do a second night Seder together. There's a community Seder. And I remember, you know, sort of the blood running out of my head at that point and saying, I've got to sit through like one of those and, you know, not be home. And he goes, no, Mike said, it's fun. It's cool. It's all right. So we did it there. And there were like 180 people that showed up to eat, you know, overcooked chicken on paper plates. And it was a wonderful heimische Gerichtene kind of Seder. And it reminded me that indeed these places that were, these ceremonies that were held in institutional settings, I mean the traditional Jewish home festival was happening outside of these walls with that many people 30 years ago.
It's true, people didn't know how to be Jewish, and we had to provide that. If we didn't have those second night Seders during those years, there would have been a whole cross-section of the Jewish community here who would not be able to celebrate Passover at all, Pesach at all.
So I want to give some kavod to Peretz. Can't see where you are with the lights. There you are. Okay, so a couple years ago, Peretz was on the program committee for the Reform Rabbinical Association that decided to have its national, we can call it international because there were Canadians, conference in San Francisco. And the theme that they came up with for how to explain, you know, Bay Area Jewish life to all of the Reform rabbis was American Jewish life on the edge of the continent. And I like that was the setup when they got out here to try to figure out what exactly is going on here and what it means. So moving us, sort of reflecting on the past to getting us to the moment now. And I'll say this stereotypically as a fifth-generation native San Franciscan. What if a typical New York Jew were to show up, you know, tomorrow morning here in Marin County, take a look around and have whatever that, you know, look might be, and said to you, explain it to me. How would you explain that to that person?
You're sitting in it. You're sitting in it. When during that thank you, that beautiful introduction, we talked about the JCC being the little trailer on the hill, which it was, and Michael was leading a growing, vibrant congregation just in the field. We're sitting right now in the field in between the JCC and Road of Shalom at the time. And I know when I was brought up, they said, well, we're going to build the JCC building, so we want you to be part of building the JCC building. And there's talk about it being a campus. Now, being from the JCC world, where the epicenter of that world was New York, JCCs were sort of self-appointed neutral ground for everything Jewish. You know, you couldn't be to this, you couldn't be to that, you had to be right down there somewhere. And the notion that a campus could be developed with a JCC and a day school was not all that novel. Those were happening elsewhere. With the JCC in a federation office, a JCC senior housing, a JCC along with the Jewish Family and Children's Service, but a JCC with a synagogue as part of the campus, that was novel. And I think Michael and I were the only ones who thought it was just the natural, great idea. It wasn't until we started talking to other people that we found out what all the problems could have been in everybody else's mind. So if I were, somebody from New York were coming over here, I'd tell them that what was supposed to be trend-setting then hasn't been so. Because while campuses have emerged all over the Jewish community, to the best of our knowledge, this is the only one with a JCC, a day school, and a synagogue in its cluster. And that has a lot to do with the character of the particular community. And none of those institutions have lost their broader community mission in so doing, Mr. New York. So there.
I'm not so sure that this is the only one now, but at the time that we started building this project in 1985, when we started planning it, when we opened it in 1989, it was the only one, and we were getting telephone calls weekly. How are you doing it? And a lot of warning calls from like officers in the Central Conference of American Rabbis saying, you're risking the autonomy of your synagogue by doing this, and a lot of warning calls from members of old founding members of the congregation who remembered when there was a partnership between the JCC and the synagogue, and legend has it the JCC kicked the synagogue out of the building and left a bit of bitterness that had to be overcome. It was a great idea to do this, and I think it created a unique Jewish community.
It reflects to some degree what we all know about Marin. You know, turf has a different context here. There's not a lot that's forbidden. Lifestyle is broad and open. I mean, listen to our panelists that came earlier and talk about the diversity of attitude and lifestyle. So the notion of that was far more acceptable, and is far more acceptable in a community like this.
Take a moment of personal professorial linguistic privilege, and that is I have my favorite polysyllabic word I get to use right now, and I'm going to tell my students about it on Tuesday. And that is that oftentimes when we meet for educational moments, they tend to be self-congratulatory, because we all like to get together and talk about how great we are, what we in academics call filiopietism. Thank you. So in my effort to avoid...
Was that the multisyllabic word?
In my effort to avoid a filiopietistic approach to this afternoon, I'd like to know from our esteemed leaders if there's one thing you think that Marin County Jews or the Marin County Jewish communities need to learn. What is it that we still need to learn and still need to understand?
That's really, there are myriad things that's only 2 syllables. 3 syllables or two syllables, depending how you pronounce it, that we have to learn. But to put a finger on 1 or 2, I don't think I could. I think that we've learned a lot. We've learned how to learn together, to work together, to create opportunities for people to reach out to the general community. I would be at a loss to say that there was a gaping hole in our needs that we need to fill desperately right now. Can I just say one thing? Parents asked that when people ask questions, they be questions at the rabbi meetings. They call these sessions, the breakout sessions, answer and answer sessions. Go ahead, Elliot.
Hold on, I'll intervene one moment while you think about it, because in my days as Moshe the Rosh, we used to introduce our staff by giving them an object. It looked like whatever the usual object was, and then the staff member would have to say, well, this may look like a toilet plunger, actually it's a, and then they have to, it's an improv, so they don't know what they're going to get. I forgot the session Rabbi, Rabbi Krause of blessed memory, and I was out of objects. So, I just handed him my watch. And he picked it up, and without skipping a beat, he said, to most people, this looks like a watch, but to a rabbi, it looks like nothing at all, and he threw it across the lawn. Please.
I think there are some enormous challenges to being and doing Jewish here. And because we have a community, Marin County, of extraordinary bounty and extraordinary beauty. We all know people who take advantage of that all the time. And not only that, we are politically unshackled. We can believe in lots of different things, and we all know people who believe in lots of different things, and it's all okay. So the question of where is Jewish practice basically another element of lifestyle, like bike riding or enjoying nature, or to what degree does it become the center force? Those things that I know the people we always kind of toss around. I don't know how many people today are where Beverly, my wife, is home trying to get rid of chametz from the pantry because it's Pesach's coming up, when many of us would rather be out hiking. So to the degree, and what are we doing about that in terms of the messages we're also raising our kids and the next generation that we're handing this Jewish progressive torch to?
Thank you. Reflecting on all of the speakers of today, were there any stories or inferences that resonated with you more, or that you'd like to sort of respond to or talk about?
There was one thing that struck me in Mayim Bialik's, I even wrote it down here somewhere. She did her 7 values. I didn't write down all 7 values. I was not taking notes. Anybody have the 7 values? One of them, the first one she talked about was the complex family. And that, I got that. We all have complex families. But the notion of the Marin Jewish community, with its myriad of issues, opportunities, points of view, is very, very much like a complex family. Our communal complex family gets even more so, because I'm not sure how many other Jewish communities nationally have 3 out of every 5 Jews living in a household with someone who's not Jewish in this community. That adds to the complexity of the family today. And it's certainly not Marin, it's not unique to Marin, but it's certainly one of our community's distinctions. That resonated with me.
I don't think that's unique. I think the countrywide, the statistics would be pretty similar. That 60% of the households have some non-Jewish person, or at least someone who would be considered non-Jewish by some denomination of Judaism living in the household. What struck me the most was the way the speakers tried to approach the idea of God. It sounded uncomfortable for me for most of the speakers when they got to the point of God to really deal with what God is to a Jew and to them, and how the community offers a nurturing opportunity for them to question and what is God, and to try to find some answer for it. It's hard.
Thank you. Talk a little bit about Interstate 101, or the inverse of Interstate 101, recalling several of the speakers, Dov and Geraldine especially, the theme would be geography, land, agriculture, beauty, Mount Tamalpais, perhaps as Mount Sinai, leading in some cases to Zionism in Israel, which is itself a very complex topic here in this county. So what I wanted just to throw out to you was all of that. The idea of environment and geography and mountains and Jewish life in Marin and Israel and Zionism, however you choose to sort of craft or engage that, because it is something that seems particular to this place, intimately interwoven in the way we understand ourselves as citizens of the county, but I think also as Jews. And several of our speakers sort of used the physicality of the place as a platform to go wherever it was that they would end up being.
I think that since I retired and became Rabbi Emeritus of Rodeo Shalom, I've noticed that the congregation has really gone to the geography of Marin County and expanded its programming. Rabbi Michael Lezak has a program he calls Torah on the Trails, and on Shabbat morning they hike and learn Torah at the same time. I did that when I was young and was able to hike in Massachusetts. I think that that the community finds a way to practice Judaism in the great outdoors and to appreciate what they have. I know that Rabbi Stacy, met Frank Friedman, her husband, on a hike on Christmas Day many years ago for Jewish singles who needed another way to practice Judaism on the trails. It's a great place to foster romance and to foster religion. Sorry.
Yeah, given the geographical vastness of this county, and its beauty, it's hard to call anywhere a central address for anything. But to the degree, this campus and the beautiful campus in Tiburon of Kol Shofar are central addresses of Jewish life, it's somewhat antithetical to the Marin ethic. I mean, there's more concrete on this 3.5 acres than anywhere outside of Northgate Mall. And it's ironic here in this county of extraordinary beauty. The biggest complaint is, you come this, where are the trees and where are the trails? Because you're full of buildings and walkways. And frankly, being a boy from Chicago, I take some no small comfort in that. I need the smell of asphalt once in a while.
By the way, I think that our outdoor worship spaces are wonderful and provide opportunities that other areas in the country don't have. But I was at Kol Shofar for the first time. The first time I walked into the new Kol Shofar, it took my breath away that an indoor space could be so beautiful and so conducive to worship as that building and that sanctuary. Gorgeous.
So I co-edited a book on California Jews, and it was published by a press located in northern New England. So when I was speaking to the editor and she was trying to figure out what the chapters were, she says, you got to have one on Jewish surfing, because that was the stereotype of California Jews. I only later found out that we actually did have a Jewish surfing champion in the 1950s. For the final question, and I gave him a bit of a lead-in for this. This is the historian's question. If you could pick any Jewish person from any time period of history or today, invite them to lunch in Marin County, who would you invite?
Or her.
Why? Or her, thank you. Why would you invite them, and where would you eat?
You've expanded that question a lot since you gave it to us.
That was the question?
Go ahead, Elliot.
Well, I cheated. I struggled in the last 3.5 minutes with that question, and I must admit it's two. And you'll know why I cheated to pick two in a moment. The first is mein Zayda Oliver Shalom, who was one of the few Yiddish-speaking Jews that emigrated here from Dublin, Ireland. And today's St. Patrick's Day, and he used to show up on Pesach in a green kippah during an era where there was only black or white. That's all you wore, because that's all you could basically steal out of the shul box. So today I think of my Zeta, and if I had one person I could have lunch with here in Marin County, it would have been him on this particular day. In general, however, when I think of the challenges facing Jewish life, not just here but globally, and the richness of Jewish tradition, I think of one of my mentors when I was in the JCC world, Rabbi David Hartman, who was one of the first ones that said to me, "So what do you do at these JCCs?" And by the way, he was a bit of a guru amongst JCC leaders in the 70s and 80s. I said, "Well, you know, JCC, just think of it. We have this program, we have that program, so what do you do Jewish?" I attempted an answer. He goes, "No." He said, "You are responsible for Jewish identity, and Jewish identity is the product of Jewish memory. And the institutions today are the vehicles for Jewish memory." He later moved to Israel and became one of the great forces for bringing many of the factions of modern Israel and modern Judaism together in his writing and his teaching. And I'd love to have him come to Marin County today.
David was a good friend of mine. I studied with him in Israel one-on-one for all my sabbaticals. But when I was in Israel, first of all, I have to say, when I retired, I heard that this great scholar, Marc Dollinger, was moving to Marin County and joining Rosh Shalom and was going to enhance and enrich the life of Rosh Shalom. And I said to myself, why is he coming only when I'm retiring? But you have brought a lot of substance and energy to the Jewish world here, and I appreciate your presence, truly.
Thank you.
I was going to say that too, Michael. So.
Elliot, yours?
I'm sorry, mine's over.
That's all right. When I was studying with David Hartman, I would go with him in a taxi that he took every week, twice or three times a week, to the university on Mount Scopus and teach classes. And when he couldn't be at a class, he asked Yeshayahu Leibovich to substitute for him. He's not a name that's real well known in the Jewish world, but he was probably the greatest modern philosopher and theologian in Israel in the 20th century. He was a committed Orthodox Jew, but he was totally open to the pluralism of Israel. He was totally willing to confront the government of Israel and question those decisions it made that sort of undermined its humanitarian image. And he was brilliant. He defined the world and the world of knowledge in a way that since his death has never been defined like that again. And he would be the person I would like to have lunch. And I would like to pack a picnic and go sit in some easily accessible outdoor space and sit and talk with him and learn from him and ask him to teach my fellow Marinites.
David Hartman says that the job of the JCCs, and perhaps for everybody in organized Jewish life and somewhat less organized Jewish life, is to create Jewish memories. Then I think I speak on behalf of everyone in this room, not to mention folks in this county and beyond, for whom the two of you have created many, many memories. So we thank you for those and for all you continue to do for our community. Thank you both.
Thank you.